Hi, I'm Randy Chong. I'm a solutions engineer working for Hitachi Vantara. I've been one of our technical architects within their solutions engineering organization for about the last uh, 12, 12 years now, um, developing a converged infrastructure solution that Hitachi offers. Prior to that, I've been in the industry since 1990, um, working in various roles such as uh, a computer service technician on site at Microsoft, installation technician early on in my career, and sales engineer working in supporting the enterprise accounts within the Pacific Northwest. But the last 12 years now have been at Hitachi as a solutions engineer. I think when I started, a lot of it was focused on the actual physical infrastructure, either at the server level or more commonly at the personal computer level, the PC level. It was kind of a big portion of the industry at the time. Um, to now, where a lot of stuff has grown into this large, cloud or multi-cloud infrastructure where you're not necessarily dealing so much with the physical infrastructure, but a virtual infrastructure. So I would say, between when I started and somebody starting today, a lot, a lot more virtual infrastructure knowledge will have to be had. Obviously, you still need to have a solid understanding of the basic physical infrastructure. What computers are, hard drives, memories, CPUs, all that good stuff. Um, because in the end, all of that virtual infrastructure is still backed by physical devices. So having an understanding of what the physical aspect of it is still going to be very important, right? But probably what's more important is the intricacy of the software or the cloud or the virtual infrastructure that sits on top of all of the hardware. Um, that's just a huge portion of our business nowadays, right? Customers, large corporations are shrinking their physical on-site presence, right, with data centers that are getting smaller and smaller. Not just because of the servers and everything are getting smaller and smaller. It's just they're having to run fewer and fewer because more stuff is going to be out in that cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So, having that the basic understanding of the hardware is going to be important, but also, focusing way more attention on, how all of that is implemented in a cloud type of environment. I mean, just because you're moving everything into the cloud, all your software and your applications and your logical infrastructure is in the cloud, you still need to be able to access it. So mm-hmm. your physical on ramp into the cloud, a company's IT infrastructure still needs to be robust enough to be able to support the company, all of its employees being able to access whatever is on site, on premise, as well as getting out through the internet into any of the cloud providers. I've always been motivated to learn. And early on in my career, I did a lot of learning through structured training. Went to vendor certification in trainings. Microsoft is a good example, right? I accessed all of the Microsoft courses and certification while I had time working on site at Microsoft. Mm-hmm. But over probably the last 10 or 15 years now, the longer I've been in the industry, the more I find that I I'm busy enough that I can't, dedicate a week at a time to go off site to do training. So I actually have a tendency to do a lot more um, self-driven training. And the internet is a wonderful place to do that because you can take these courses at your own pace. So yeah. I am a huge fan of, self-paced training online, just because it does give you that exposure, but you're not dedicated to having to sit in a classroom, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. The other thing, especially for somebody that's starting out that does have access to, on-site infrastructure, right? Just because you are working as in supporting a data center or a lab infrastructure, in your downtime, if you have access to that equipment, you should use the physical resources to learn, right? I mean, if you're supporting your network infrastructure going out to the cloud, start learning the Cisco commands, start, researching the Cisco, CCNA, CCNE type of courses that you can take, at your own pace, or, self-study and work on the switches and equipment that you have in your lab. I, in the last 12 years as an architect within the converged infrastructure team, I have my access to hardware that I normally didn't have access to as a sales engineer was very apparent. So I took advantage of being able to, access all of the equipment in our labs, and I learned a lot. I'm not certified on a lot of those Cisco switches, but I know how to, manage and configure and implement best practice configurations on all of them. Certifications do matter to a degree. One, it does focus your attention on what it is that you're trying to study and become certified in. The certification only gets you so far, though, right? That provides you a certain amount of book knowledge and a limited amount of actual knowledge while you're doing labs and stuff in your certification courses. Where it's important is it shows, employers that, hey, I've taken the time to study this and I've proven myself proficient in it. Where that certification helps is it gets you visibility, gets your foot in the door. It's the actual work that you're doing and implementing and putting that knowledge, to the test is really what's more valuable, at least from my perspective. I do a lot of interviews for my company as well. It's more valuable to an employer that, okay, they've spent some time and got book smart, but they spent more time getting, street smart, actual implementation smart. And, when I do interviews, it is something that I look at, right? If I ask a potential candidate, what certifications have you achieved? In some cases, I have candidates that say, I haven't achieved Cisco networking yet, but I've been working as the network operations infrastructure team for the last 5 years. And I think that experience a lot of times, speaks more at that time than the actual paper certification. If they do have paper certification, that's great, because then it gives me the opportunity to dig down a little bit more on what they've already started focusing in on. And I can ask, how have you been able to implement that knowledge that you've already gained and certified on? Certification is a good starting point. It has shown me that, okay, they've taken some amount of time to at least get learned up on a certain area. But what's, usually more important to me is outside of certification is what is their willingness and their enthusiasm to actually learn on their own. One of my key questions that I like to ask candidates are, or is, what technologies have you pursued that aren't related to your current day-to-day job that you have pursued, because it might help you down the road. And that question right there shows me that they've actually been thinking about technologies that aren't necessarily relevant right now, but they know it will be relevant to them, 6, 12, months down the road or 2 years down the road. And they're investing in themselves for that future. Some of the key things that I like to see from, my colleagues or potential candidates is soft skills, right? The ability to communicate, and convey, messaging, or convey a thought or an idea, and be able to drive that conversation intelligently with your peers, or to, if it's a, customer type of relationship or a role, being able to speak to customers in such a way that you come off as an authority on the technology or what you're talking about, but in a a friendly enough way that it's pleasant to have that conversation. So it's a lot of the soft skills that are sometimes more important, because you can learn the technology as you go, but having having a good personality and a good attitude and ability to communicate, those are things that that you develop over time. And I think that's something that people should always be working on. People skills is one thing. There's other soft skills that are a lot of times even more important, right? That critical thinking, the ability to develop ideas and thoughts and solutions, right? Trying to get from A to B sometimes takes 5 different steps to get there, and the ability to the critical thinking necessary to determine, okay, I get from A to A prime to B, or to double prime all the way to B. That's important as well. So, and that kind of just comes with experience as well, though. So just because you're book smart, you still need to know how to implement that correctly, and sometimes think outside the box. I mean, I have had, colleagues that their entire identity was about, a particular technology. I am the VMware guy. I'm the god of all things VMware. Am I going to want to go fishing with you? Probably not. Right? So just find that balance, right? It's great that you have that knowledge and you are an expert, but that may not have to always be your identity. That's a lot of what you know, but you're also a father, you're also a brother, you're also a husband. So there's lots of, there's that balance. When I got into high tech, I didn't get into high tech because I was a computer nerd when I was in junior high and high school. I actually got into it because it was a means to an end at the time. The computer field service allowed me to work with my hands. It did get me into a computer industry kind of job, but it paid well. I'll be honest, right? Yeah. And all throughout my career, I've been lucky that I have been able to take jobs and positions that paid fairly well. Could I have, moved and hopped around to other jobs that paid even more? Probably. But I've always had that attitude of, the job actually pays me well enough that I'm happy with it. It gives me that opportunity to be a good husband, to be a good father, and spend more time doing those things. rather than trying to go for that extra, $50,000 a year or whatever it is. I used my daughter as a good example of that. She has friends. She's only been working in her field now for about a year, but she has friends that are still in college, and she is from a financial perspective, she's light years ahead of where they're at, because they're going to come out of their college lives with a tremendous amount of debt, which I understand because my son went the college route for a good portion of his education, and then he decided, you know what, structured college, learning like that just isn't working well for me. I mean, he got his AA or his associates and stuff like that, but he ended up changing his mind and went to a culinary school. I mean, he was very focused, and he excelled at it, and he's a great chef. So I think that I wish a lot more people would educate their kids or themselves about look at trade school, vocational school, targeted learning type of opportunities rather than just a broad 4-year degree kind of thing. I'm a huge fan of that. In many cases, it gets you more engaged a lot quicker and puts your career in your hands so much sooner, right? And I'm glad my daughter figured that out, because we, leading up to her graduation in high school, we started doing all the college, tours and stuff like that. And she was saying, oh, I want to go to 4-year college and do this and that. But, all said and done, once she got targeted and focused on what she wanted to do, she actually did tell us, yeah, I was mainly doing the college thing for you guys, and that broke my heart. I didn't want her to be miserable in a 4-year college, just because she thought it was going to make my wife and I happy. So I'm glad that she learned that way before she got deep into the college routine. I'm not against college, by the way. There's lots of professions that you can't do it without it, right? I'm not going to become a mechanical engineer in a 9-month course. I think like I was saying, when I do interviews, the certifications, even degrees, those are good starting points. But what ends up becoming more important in the long run is that individual's ability to learn and their desire to learn and ability to learn while they're actually doing. And that's, like I said, a lot of times more important than that actual certification. For the right people that are super motivated and want to study and learn it, they can get absorbed completely into it and into that technology and into the job. I would say make sure you maintain that balance though, because, and I find myself doing this all the time, I'm working late hours and I don't have to, but I like to, because to me, I feel like I'm getting more done, or I can, use more evening time to do research or whatnot. But make sure you find that balance, right? Don't get so engrossed in the job that is the only thing you do. You still have an actual life as well. And then those that have, wives and kids, that's to me, that's more important than the job, right? The job is a means to take care of that family.